You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
As people know, the mission log style is to jump in on just like minor observations, little funnies, and what have you. I kind of wanted to start us off with, though, that we are also going to get into the minutia of the don't wait. We're not going to just like glean past all the tough stuff that happens in this episode. There's a lot of tough stuff that I want to get people ready for, but that doesn't mean there isn't funny stuff that happens in this episode.
This is one that I feel like we're almost giving it short shrift by, taking the 5-10 minutes or so to have some fun with, because there are so many meaty topics to talk about in this. But it's the Orville, and there was definitely some fun moments. And
1,000,000%, and it's worth mentioning because it's part of the Orville. So totally. So you tell me the funny moment you found first.
Dance off, baby.
You loved that?
I loved that. I thought that was such a fun way. And you know what? I think if international conflicts were solved with dance-offs, we'd be better off as a planet.
It's a pretty good argument.
I really do.
It was definitely the Three Amigos recreated.
Yeah.
And we were I loved like the red herring of like, we're gonna shoot off, but nope, we're dancing off. And that is a very fun Gordon-esque
That was a very
too.
good Gordon movie. And I love the fact that the song was Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
It's so cute.
Which, name of the episode, about a girl. And
I didn't think about it.
I thought of something you didn't think of.
I mean, it's more than likely that will happen very often. Oh, that's so funny. So I thought it was kind of silly when they're all, cuckooing over the baby, and they're like, oh, we should be at the bridge anyway. And I'm like, well, okay, first of all, we just dealt with an episode of someone it being a big deal that someone is in command. If everyone's gone, who's in command right now? What happened? Yes. So I thought that was odd.
That is odd. The only person I could think of, because we haven't met anybody beyond like the alpha shift of the bridge crew yet, maybe Ensign Parker, who we love. Who may not be able to run a marathon anytime soon, but I think he could, take the big chair.
He's so low ranking, though, that I don't know that would have happened.
Yeah, I don't know either, but,
It
everybody
definitely
else.
was B shift. B shift was definitely, Delta shift was on, for sure.
No doubt about that. So, Yaphet, what do you think? I think Yaphet is looking for love in all the wrong places, including sickbay.
Listen, I thought it was super charming that he's like trying to be sick to get Dr. Finn's attention. And now here's the problem. She's saying no several times and he's not listening. That's problematic.
That's problematic.
And he forms part of his gelatinous self to indicate that he could pleasure her in a sense that would be compatible to her species. That is indecent exposure.
I am uncomfortable enough now to keep my mouth shut, and that's saying a lot.
I'm just saying, listen, it's a funny moment, and I'm not discounting the humor, but also the implications there.
Yeah.
Let's just hope certain men don't take this as a sign, like it's okay to do that.
Yes,
but my pee-pee's really big,
and I'm glad it did not model behavior that was successful, because he slinked out of there. So,
but the worst part about it is, and this is not necessarily a positive about me, I was still charmed by him. I think it's Norm Macdonald's voice mixed with this, like, never gonna get a girl.
His dry delivery was so spot on.
But, sweet.
I'm gonna hit a milestone wedding anniversary here in about 7 months.
Silver?
No, it does start with a 2 though, so I don't know what that one's called.
20?
Yeah.
So that's silver, I think. 20 years.
I thought silver's 25.
Oh, it's 25.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But I don't know. So it's been a while since I've been out there pitching. I'll just, kind of put it that way.
Okay.
But when I was, really, and honestly, it was...
You were exposing yourself.
No, absolutely not. Stop that. Earl, cut that out.
No.
It was not that. I was just, very... it's kind of like Ted Mosby on How I Met Your Mother. You're just trying to meet the right one, and you try and you try and you try. And, I can see, that Yaphet as uninformed or, ill-advised his tactics were. I honestly think he's just looking for companionship.
So this is a grander topic that we may talk about at another time, but the more I've learned about how men mate in our species, they were typically encouraged by their their father figure to just keep swinging, right? Just like, oh, ask that girl out.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's a numbers game. And that's really, really bad in my personal opinion.
Cheers.
Then, yeah. So
For those not on video, I just raised a glass.
you certainly did. I'm just saying, like, I give I feel a little sympathy for people that's how they were raised. I was raised to have similar expectations and like, to also like be really wary of men. But so nothing was perfect, but as we age, we should like realize like, oh, it's not a numbers game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not
Right.
trying. Now, that being said, just because you mentioned that about like how you're wild and crazy guys days, but I don't think Yaphet's like swinging and a missing and then going to hit on.
No, I think he likes Dr. Finn.
He really likes her.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's okay, because no is a complete sentence.
No is
and
no.
He should have taken it the 3 times he tried to come in.
And do
before,
not
so.
show yourself. So that's well, we're skipping ahead a little bit to the
Okay, Seth, we
messages,
see
morals,
you.
and meanings
We sure are.
of the show, which was great. So again, I gotta go back to Adrienne Palicki and her ability to just take a softball thrown up by Seth MacFarlane and hit it out of the park. When they are having a drink in the lounge that's probably at the front of the ship, maybe on deck 10, I'm not really sure.
Maybe it's in the forward
the front part
of the
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really
Maybe
have.
you could see the space.
I don't have the schematics yet, but I do have a Orville Eagle Moss Orville XL edition. So I might get to read
We
the
love
magazine.
Eagle Moss stuff.
Sure, shilling for Eagle Moss now. But I may read that in the magazine that it came with. So they're up there and they're talking about sort of the moral questions that you ask, and this is sort of a theme that I noticed the show running into also with a few episodes so far in, is that the questions are there.
Mm-hmm.
They ask the questions. Not a lot of preachiness though, and I dig that they're willing to ask the questions. To get us talking about it, to get other folks talking about it, hopefully listening to this podcast and webcast so they can talk about it, but not a whole lot of preachiness. So they ask the questions, is corrective surgery for a deformity the same as changing a girl into a boy? Are we honoring the cultures, alien cultures, if we let them do things that are against a universal code of ethics? So those are the sort of questions that Kelly and Ed were chatting about in at the bar. But when he said, "Kelly, suppose you and I had a baby," and she looked right at him and said, "On purpose?" And just the delivery was just perfect.
It's so good. It's so good. It was relatable. Like, the thing is, I still believe that she's on this ship because she actually just wants to get back together with him. And I know she also has her own career to fulfill. But my question too is like, if she's such a high-ranking officer and he was gone all the time trying to become a captain, why wasn't she also gone all the time? And now it's a priority to her. It's not a plot hole necessarily, but it's like getting in the weeds a little bit too much.
In the military there is a certain minimum number of years to move up to the next rank and that kind of thing.
But also she would have had to have put that in order to be where she's ranking as well. So she would have been busy just the same.
I would think so. I think
is my argument.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. I think, and she could just possibly passing up command in order to do what she's doing. Kind of like Riker passed up command for so long to stay on the Enterprise D.
Totally. What was it? Warp me to the tempo of 1, 2, 3, 4 or something. It's so dumb. But
warp in the factor of 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's what it is. Anyway, we're talking about a different show. I think my point is she loves to take jabs at him, even though she'd probably love to have a baby, or you know what I mean? Like they both, like, even for him in the previous episode to go, "No, you did us a favor. Thank you for cheating on us." Like, but he does a dick move.
Well, I
it's
think
a Captain Dick move.
Yeah.
That's how we'll say Dick. It's Captain Dick move.
That's first name Dick, last name move.
That's right.
Yeah, as long as we say your rank in front of it, we
Captain
can.
Dick.
Captain Dick.
The move.
So, jumping over to Gordon Malloy a little bit. Loved the Rudolph exercise.
Did you?
I loved it as far as the way it was summed up at the end when Bortus said, if the baby was euthanized as his father wished, and Gordon was like, wait, what? I don't think that was ever on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually we needed him to say that because some of us haven't seen, maybe some of us don't watch Rudolph every Christmas,
Yeah.
right? And go, wait, is that what the dad wanted? You
Right.
know, so we needed someone to go, no, but
Yeah.
also just get in there quick. He's so good with, emotional but deadpan and flat. I don't know. It's just he reminds me of one of my favorite friends and actors, Paul Hungerford, who I do a lot of improv with. And there's a lot of similarities in those men of just how they're just funny, but they're also going to drink a beer with you. And they also
Right.
know what's what. It's
Yeah.
But to your point, Gordon saying that the once capital of what once existed as the United States of America was Nabisco, is a huge throwaway comedy, commentary that
Yeah.
I flippin' loved.
Right.
It basically is like, oh, you mean there was a capitalist company, Nabisco? Got it.
Right. Yep.
Got it. It was really funny. It was just like subtle but funny.
Yeah,
to me.
capitalism. Corporation.
Capitalism.
Yep.
Capitalism. It was all there.
Yeah.
It was and I'm sure Seth or one of his brilliant writers got that in under the wire, but it was just really, really clever.
No doubt about it. And then when he got used to kind of demonstrate how,
Oh, that's when he said it, when he was when he was demonstrating how dumb he was.
inferior that. But I loved his other line was 4 chambers of the heart, chamber of secrets.
Yeah. Listing off, which is probably, oh God, it's actually even more complicated that they talk about a J.K. Rowling. Okay, this is a whole big thing. We're going to have to move past this section
This is
really
not. So
quick.
this is the 3rd episode in a row. And I don't know if Seth MacFarlane writes every episode or not. I haven't looked ahead. I just kind of keep an eye on who writes each episode and who writes and who directs.
Right.
So this is episode 3. Seth MacFarlane has written all 3, singular acting credit. So
No writing room or anything?
it certainly probably.
There's got to be a writing
Yeah,
room that he takes ultimate credit.
yeah.
Like they got to break stories somewhere.
Right. I'm sure other people have their eyes on it and that kind of thing, but
I can't imagine.
like I said,
but we're going to talk about that too.
yeah, singular writing credit on IMDb anyway, and on the show. Opening credits is Seth MacFarlane, written by. Speaking of Ed Mercer, I love the stand that he took against. Now, I had a really hard time saying this. Mocklin, Captain Vorak, in the recap. Did I get it right that time?
Mocklin, Captain Vorak.
Okay,
Yes.
good. I love the stand that he took against him. Leaving the council room when he would not let the captain pass him, and he said, "You're frail. Do you understand what that means?" And he said, "I have an anti-bullying law named after me. Yes, I know what it means."
So sad, so relatable,
But so
But
good.
also so badass, right?
Yeah.
Because he is shorter than that, but he's so confident.
Well, it's easy to stand up against a little guy.
Is what we think.
Yeah.
And that's he really did the true essence of bravery. He might have been afraid in that moment.
I'm sure he was
But
terrified.
He had, he stood his ground. It was really good. It was a really good visual and emotional moment.
So
I agree.
Yeah, to stand up against somebody who could do you great harm is
Kind of reminds me of Boimler's rule that thou shalt not work that hard, or something like the most important rule.
Exactly right. The one that he gets
named
associated
after,
with
named after him.
Yeah, and he's like, no.
Yeah, it's the worst.
And I think we're starting to see some similarities and some differences start to form with with maybe more traditional Star Trek. I'm gonna go way back to the Omega Glory. That was the one with the Yangs and the Combs, and the Captain Paul Tracy is with the Yangs, and they're trying to fight against the Combs, who are the Asians, and the Yangs are kind of the Americans. And it turns out that this is sort of a future post-apocalyptic parallel Earth where the Yankees and the communists sort of went through with mutually assured destruction, and were still fighting a war well after anybody should have been done caring. And they had sort of misread, misunderstood, misapplied the Constitution. And Kirk was just able to, without even looking at it, just read the Constitution, which is great.
Wow.
If you can do that, that's impressive. Like James C. Kirk, man, that's That's why he's the character I know and love. And then you have Jean-Luc Picard, who has apparently the entire works of William Shakespeare memorized at any given time that he can just
totally
drop on anybody. But these folks are different, right? They know their job. They're very good at their job.
Right.
But they're not polymaths. They don't know, they're not Renaissance people. They don't know everything about everything. They just sort of know their job. They're good with the technology that they work with. In that case, they're not very different from you and I. Society has evolved. The technology has evolved. But the people are generally the same. And I like that.
Yeah, totally. Like we need that as this show in order to relate. We can't.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to watch a show that's like super highbrow, and they're like beyond us,
Yeah.
We could watch that show, but then we'd find something wrong with that society. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
If we couldn't, so like, I wonder if Kirk knows the Constitution by heart and Picard knows Shakespeare by heart, Ed Mercer must know every old school song by heart. That's got to be his.
There's
expertise.
Got to
right?
be something, yeah. And Gordon apparently movie trivia, I think, was his choice. And I don't know what the other ones have. Kelly seems very well rounded.
She knows some pop music.
Dr. Finn seems like she's more than just the ship's doctor. I think she's very well rounded as well.
Yeah.
And Isaac.
Oh, and everyone's well rounded, but I just mean more like their history knowledge.
Right. And Isaac's just a cheater because he's an artificial life form, and he's just has instant access to everything.
This is true.
Well, this is the part of the show where we talk about the morals, meanings, and messages, and ask if this episode of the Orville aligns with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. So, Jessica, I'll ask you, since I can't ask myself, what stood out to you as messages, morals, and meanings in the episode about a girl?
I have a huge, gigantic preface that I'm going to give as we go into this episode.
Hit me.
Because I feel personally it would be irresponsible of me to talk about this episode without citing people who helped me educate myself about this episode, and also like let's talk about the problems and perhaps the positives about this show. So I have a friend named Jessie Gender who does amazing, mostly Star Trek deep dives on YouTube, and I asked her, like, do you have any insight onto some of the problematic aspects of this episode? I know it's not a perfect episode, so I'm quoting directly from her article on theadvocate.com, and I'll share the links for her articles when this episode comes out. She literally wrote about this episode. She goes, yep, actually here, I wrote this whole article.
Oh, no way.
And she has 2 articles on it, and she's a very well thought person who puts a lot of thought. And also some people will disagree that intention doesn't matter. Some people think, well, even if your intention wasn't to hurt me, it did.
Yeah, no.
And that's important to note, because that's true,
Sure.
right? Like, even if it hurt my feelings, but you didn't intend to, it hurt my feelings.
Yeah, sorry I hurt your feelings. No.
Whatever. Yeah, you
that's
can't be
not
flippant
cool.
that way.
Yep.
But she also does give a lot of credence to, like, the effort. And that's where I try to go. Is like, I can kind of see where you were heading with this. But that's exactly this point with this little blurb I'm going to pull out. So she says, this isn't to say that we shouldn't be critical of our allies or constantly push them to be better. We should always point out problematic or offensive content in our media and culture from creators both within and outside the LGBT world. Yet we can't also continually tell those attempting to help that we are upset they aren't doing enough or that they shouldn't have tried because they fell short of the mark. If we continually do that, we run the risk of ostracizing those who want to be on our side and be a good ally. We need to reach out in kindness and, while pointing out what was wrong with their approach, acknowledge that they did indeed make an attempt to understand. So that's a very good point that Jessie brings up.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are good and bad about this episode. And there are morals that we could talk about that, you know, a lot of people conflate this episode with the Outcast, where Riker falls in love with what is supposed to be a non-binary race and falls in love with a female, a woman, a person who is a female.
Yeah, she's non-gender but identifies as a female.
Correct. So, which would mean that she, in our world,
Correct.
our language means
Yeah.
that she's a female.
Also
But then she
played by a
gets
female
corrected.
actress and looked very feminine in the show, which is another problem with it.
Which then I read recently
Yeah.
that Riker, or, Frakes, which wished that he had pushed more for it to be a male actor, which I remember when I was watching, I was like, God, they really missed an opportunity here. But let's not forget, in that era, we were still normalizing gender. There was no transgender positive representation, right? Or intersex positive representation. And so even the fact that they got to tell that story is saying something. And so
Yeah.
this is where it fits into the Roddenberry message or intent, is that Seth MacFarlane is really trying to do his best to be an ally and tell a story that is still relevant today, and giving it to a primetime audience. That's not nothing. And there are still people who need to be exposed to what it's like to be reassigned or assigned at birth, and whether that's, morally correct or not. So the only thing that's a little confusing about this episode is they conflate transgenderism with intersexuality. So intersex is when you are born either with the antiquated term hermaphroditic, or with non-gender conforming genitals or what have you.
Right.
And then a doctor or the parents will decide which sex they want to lean
Correct.
towards, and then correct that, quote unquote correct. Transgender is when you decide that your exterior does not match your interior, and then you are transcending that to become the gender that you are.
Right.
So all of this is to say, I just kind of wanted to give us for some people maybe rolling their eyes, I can't believe we're going through this. But at the same time, I had to do a lot of research, even though I'm very well versed in this information. So I had to do research in order to be eloquent to speak about this. And I'm going to get it wrong. I welcome information if I do it wrong.
Yeah, so
But-
please hit us up on on Twitter, or send us an email on that.
I'm not above
if you
this.
have we would love. I mean, we want to listen. That's I love listening to you and what you had to say, and you listen to your friend Jesse Gender about that, and I love.
We're here
hearing
to
where we
learn
are too.
And because they did this episode, we get to have this conversation. So
Yeah.
there's a positive side to that. The one thing I think that's really missing, is really evident, is the lack of diversity in the writers' room. They didn't have sensitivity readers that really went through and go, this might not be the best, most helpful allyship you could present, because they were also conflating womanhood with ableism, or being again as a handicap. So that's also problematic to that world. Even though I see the benefit, I can see why they might have done that as a story. In order to because when you have a prejudice, you might do a lot to justify your prejudice and dig your heels in deeper.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of Rudolph, which is now also not perfect as a storytelling mechanism, which is teaching kids that you aren't worth something if you're born with a disability until you can provide a service.
Oh snap.
Yeah. So again, that's not a perfect analogy.
Yeah, until you prove your worth to the masters.
I know why he does it. It's a quick storytelling device that Seth MacFarlane uses, and it's a universally known TV, program. But when you take a second to examine what are we teaching our children, I know plenty of parents right now, whether they agree with what we're talking about or are comfortable with what we're talking about or not, that will not show old school Disney shows to their kids.
Why not?
Or namely their women, or their children, their female assigned children, right?
Right.
Because it's teaching them an unhealthy way to look at relationships with men.
Yeah.
It's setting up maybe I know it screwed me up a little bit. I think my Prince Charming is going to come, blah, blah, blah. And so they'll withhold that maybe until later, until they can make a little bit better of a decision on, or have a discussion on, that's not really how it works.
Right.
So Rudolph could stand to have that. We're as a society, we're just now waking up to ableism and ableist talk and stuff like that. And Rudolph is one of those examples of, finally you're of use to society. And now we see Havina in this episode prove that she's of use to the society. She shouldn't have had to do that. Right. She shouldn't have had to go, well, I was this great writer. That's why you shouldn't have That's why you shouldn't reassign this child.
So I agree with you that you shouldn't have to justify your existence to do that. I do very much like the message of with diversity comes different strengths. And if everybody thinks the same, and if everybody acts the same, and if everybody has the same goals and agenda, then you end up with a planet that does nothing but create weapons and blow stuff up all the time. Havina had a gift. That gift was beneficial to the world. Rudolph had a gift. That gift was beneficial to the children of the world on Christmas, when he saved Christmas.
Yeah.
So I do, and both of those folks would have been, or individuals would have been, either shunned or tucked away or kept in the attic or locked in the basement, and would not have been able to kind of reach their full potential otherwise. So I took that as a positive, but the part of it that you just added, man, I really got to look through, re-examine some things.
It's a tough subject,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this on and off air. We're all educating ourselves, growing, and as the conversation becomes easier to have, the language is changing, the vocabulary is growing.
Right.
So we're all going to step in it sometimes, or we're all going to be like, you know what, this is a blind spot I
Yeah.
have, but how can I change that? Not dissimilar from what you're saying, like they're asking questions. And it's really awesome to see Seth MacFarlane, even though he knows that he's right, that they shouldn't reassign the gender, they're asking questions of themselves, and he's going to a confidant to ask what if they're doing the right thing or not.
And that was good, but you're right. There has to be some sort of value found other than just serving the people that would otherwise discard you.
And you bring up a good point by mentioning that, is that we still as a society don't know how to accommodate for people that aren't born as the quote unquote norm.
Yeah.
Right? Or if they're intersex as that a child, we see that as a deformity. And so we're still in a society that's shunning and not seeing the value of people just for being who they are.
Yeah.
The best way transgender was ever explained to me by Jesse, actually, was the thing that people don't quite understand is that we all are struggling to understand our identity. All of us. Where do we fit? What kind of nerd am I? Am I not nerdy enough for this?
Am I too nerdy? Am I just the right amount of nerdy?
100%. I met a wonderful gay couple, which actually, side note, there's complications in showing a non-acceptant society of a female, but we're also seeing a non-judgmental crew of we're seeing non-judgmental gay couple.
Right.
So that's a good example of
Yeah.
like, well, that's a win, right? So one of the gentlemen I met this weekend, he's like, I'm afraid I'm not too gay enough for our culture. So that's putting that aside. Transgender is just an identity exploration in the form of gender. It's one way to look at it.
Right.
And knowing that something's different, but something doesn't conform. And that is, man, it's tough. It's a tough place to be.
It is. So
in our society right
so
now.
I watched the episode like you did. I probably watched it 3 times, and maybe sort of, watched and wrote the recap on viewing number 4. And while probably for the majority of the first 3 watches, I was thinking of this as kind of a transgender issue, it really struck me on this last watch on how it's just more of in my mind, a subversion of women and women's culture. So the Mocklins have females, right? They said one is born every 75 years. I don't know how old Klyden is. I don't think he's 75 years old.
Right. Right.
And then there's also Havina, and then there's also the baby. So
Yeah.
they have females. They just deny the females a word or any kind of contribution in their government, in their culture, in their industry. So to me, the episode became less about, transgender issues and more about how much do we value the female point of view and female contributions in our society, whether that's something like the Taliban or whether that's something like, other cultures across our planet, or whether that's right here in the United States. Most of the time when I hear people speak about women in the workplace to this day, they say, she's okay. She gets it, and that's all sort of code for she's willing to put up with stuff she doesn't need to put up with. You got a lot of men, a lot of dads that, try to make little tomboys out of their girls by getting them into sports and getting them to do other things. That's great. But are you trying to encourage them to be the best person they can be, or are you trying to make a little boy out of them? And those sort of things are just questions that I don't have any answers to, but it does seem like we regularly will reward people for thinking in that kind of male dominant, aggressive, all those things that we associate with male thinking. That gets rewarded, competition and insensitivity and not being vulnerable. Like those things are rewarded. And many, many, many of the female attributes that are so important to our success get minimalized and shunned and not talked about. And that's kind of where I came away with this episode.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think you're bringing up amazing points. And this is a very radical thought, but it's not. I think our society will benefit when we start embracing that men can be vulnerable, that men can be emotional, and that being strength and all, like that strength can come in different forms. I think we're dealing with a lot of the problems that we're dealing with in our society right now is the squashing of these natural tendencies that men have, and we just tell them it's not okay in society to behave that way.
Right.
So, a lot of people may buck up against that statement, but if you sit with yourself freely, I know I have masculine tendencies. Yes, it was encouraged. What you just explained, my father definitely wished I was a boy. They thought I was going to be a boy. They didn't check. And they were excited, like, his Italian mother was, oh, what a good boy you're going to have. It's the first boy.
Right.
And out comes a vagina, which, by the way, I love that Seth MacFarlane just on prime time just says vagina. It's really great.
I like that he said depends on how you use it.
Well, 100%. It's great. It's
doesn't give you a lisp.
It doesn't. Well, depending on how you use it. So it's amazing, 100%. And
so your name was almost Jessica Dick Verdi.
Joe.
Just Joe.
It's almost Joe Verdi. Then the next Joe came, so it was the family name. But so my dad had a really hard time wrapping his head around having a little girl.
Right.
And then he thought of me as fragile, all sorts of things. I can't speak for him. I was a baby, but I was raised with a lot of tomboy tendencies. But I don't know that he did that on purpose. I think I have tendencies towards that anyway.
Right.
It made me wonder, like, well, why wasn't I a boy? What would it be like to a boy? Like, I know that I'm a female now, or that this is something I say too. I'm very fortunate that I was born into a body that I am assigned with, that my brain is aligned with. That's a privilege,
Yes.
But that's a long way to say I can be honest that I have masculine tendencies, that I think that I can be overbearing or, what we ascribe as masculine. I
have no idea what you're talking about.
Correct. I encourage those men that are listening to our podcast right now, if you go, no, I'm definitely not sensitive, blah, blah, blah. Sit with yourself for 2 minutes, look inside, meditate, take a breath, and just go, actually, is that possible? Is it possible that I wish I could cry?
And you want to know something really that just I learned recently that just blew my mind?
Ooh, I can't wait.
The big buzzword with the top tier military forces, like we're talking Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon, the Deltas, those guys, is vulnerability, because they need to be able to strip any ego away from receiving feedback and fully embrace that, so they can squeeze every ounce of improvement, every ounce of performance without defensiveness and without making excuses. So their big buzzwords on those teams is vulnerability and being vulnerable to feedback and vulnerable for improvement. And it's flipping amazing once you wrap your head around it.
It's interesting because there's a stigma around the military if you are in certain circles, and there also is like a blind faith or blind faith aspect to that. So what kind of vulnerability are they actually encouraging, or is it you can't talk back because you're being told that this is what that is? And I just want to examine both sides of that.
Right.
Or offer that while it's a really interesting idea in theory, are they just actually brainwashing people to go, nope, you're going to be yelled at and listen? So, and now people who can transcend that become officers and lieutenants and commanders and admirals and things like that. So, usually goes to the higher GPA or the higher IQ person who doesn't respond wholly to being told what to do.
Yeah,
I don't know.
this is top tier stuff. This isn't peeling potatoes like like you and I would be doing on the Orville.
Hey, if you're telling me, oh, hey, no, I would definitely be like repairing something.
I'd be peeling potatoes.
You'd be peeling potato. No, you wouldn't. You'd be flying. But
I'd be hugging the donkey, baby.
yes, you sure would be. The hug in the donkey. What a stupid. It's amazing. So my I wonder if you're telling me, I'm sure what they would want is less toxicity. So I would wonder if there's no toxicity at the top based off of what you're saying. That'd be really great if that's what is actually achieved. That'd be very cool. And I've seen our version of tribunals where our admirals are testifying and stuff like that. You really do see level-headed, not fully partisan men, to be fair, up there with who have opinions of like that are founded in the greater good and things like that. So I have seen examples of that, generals and things like that.
Well, men also, but not just men. An Air Force officer named Brene Brown has done wonderful work in
Brene Brown, the emotional coach?
Yes.
Same person?
Same person. Yeah, she was an Air Force officer.
What?
And, yep.
What? This is blowing my mind. Mike, blowing my mind.
I know some things.
No, you do sometimes.
Sometimes.
But not all.
So, yes, I think we've got, man, I think there was so much to talk about on this episode, whether it be transgender issues, intersex issues, just kind of like the appreciation.
Feminism.
Yes, like rampant misogyny
things.
And things that just cannot, be talked about, and there cannot be enough light shed upon these things. And as
I will say this. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and other research shows that as the role of women in government increases, things like healthcare, education, and that kind of thing all improves in countries around the world. And we have a ridiculously low percentage of female representation.
There was a country, I'm going to forget where it was, but not on our continent, that a lot of the men were killed in war, and then women couldn't initially hold office, had to hold office, and the country is like instead flourished. I'll try to look it up. I don't want to say the wrong nation and be an idiot, but one thing I would compliment you on, Mike, is at the very least you're going to ask a question. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think saying when you don't know something is really important, but you're right. There's so much to talk about in this episode. It's not a perfect episode. In some ways, the LGBTQ plus community feels harmed by this episode, and that is worth acknowledging. And I don't know that it gets better with future episodes with Mocklins, but at the same time, we do see Seth MacFarlane trying to be an ally. He could do better, right? We mentioned that with sensitivity readers, more diverse hires. I heard that he hired a transgender, a cis het actor to play transgender in the third season, and that's real tough to wrap my head around. So, moving forward, let's hope for better changes. But I thought what was really impactful was the somber ending, and Jessie actually talks about that in her article too. It was, well, let me just say this too. Let me rewind. The fact that they decided to tackle this topic in the third episode, they really set themselves apart from his biting satire, right? They're like,
Right.
no, we're going to be a serious show.
Yep.
And I meant to say that with episode 2. It was even serious then too. There's some fun
Mm-hmm.
about it, but we really see them like just go, nope, this is what yes, whether it's you think it's a Star Trek parody or what have you, we're going to talk about serious things and reflect what Star Trek like what the zeitgeist needs. This episode ending with the Moclan child being reassigned to male and Bortus losing the battle or, fighting for his child. It really brings up a good point that this one episode that Seth wrote doesn't fix the problem that we have in our society. And this one child is not going to fix the Moclan issue that they have. And it's really impactful.
Yeah, definitely a serious ending. I mean, it wasn't, there was a little bit of concern that the ending of each episode might be, a punchline. It's Arbor Day or, the Real Housewives in New Jersey. But this was a serious end. This was like probably the most serious Star Trek ending that I remember, or similar to Star Trek that I remember since City on the Edge of Forever, where, they go back in time, Edith Keeler dies, they restore the timeline, and, the last line of the episode is Kirk saying, "Let's get the hell out of here." He was just
Get the hell
done.
done.
Like, this sucked. I'm done. Let's just get on with it.
Which
and I think
is also men compartmentalizing. Is it healthy? Do you need to talk to a therapist? Probably.
Oh no,
just
Jessica!
saying.
You take those feelings, you jam them down way deep.
Oh,
where
got
nobody
it.
can get to
Oh,
you. Yeah, that's how
with
that
some
goes.
Romulan ale. I got it.
Yeah,
You're right.
that's what alcohol and no, and it's true though. But I really I wonder about. And I don't know the intent of the episode, and at this point, I don't know that the intent matters.
It doesn't matter.
If this episode hurt the LGBTQ plus community, then that is that's what matters.
It hurts. I think no one's a monolith. I think
Yeah.
that's really important to say.
Right.
Even like what I say, I'm allowed to have my own opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I align with a lot of almost everything Jesse said. As I learn, I try not to have opinions until I go, oh, you know what? Actually, I don't think that fits for me. Actually, my mother just shared a story where she was visiting cats at a cat cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is totally a digression, and it's not going to be a comfortable. I should say Jessie Gender is also Jessie Earl, but Jessie Gender is her YouTube name.
Okay.
But so there was black cats, and my mom goes, "Come here, black babies," and the woman goes, "You can't say that," and I don't think that woman was right. And I said,
Yeah.
"Mom, was that a white woman?" She goes, "Yeah." And my mom said, "I'm going to say whatever I want." Now, is that correct? I don't know.
I don't know.
But are we being too sensitive? So my point of that is we're all just trying to flip and figure it out. And sometimes people are going to be super, this is my kitty. Hi. She needs some water.
But I really, what I took away from this episode, and I think it was valuable for me, was the active what we do culturally to the female point of view, or what we have done culturally to the female point of view, in what I've seen over the last several hundred years, and probably well before that. What we do culturally, the Moclans did surgically. They kind of removed, subverted, and didn't have to deal with that female point of view from in their culture.
It's interesting because this would insinuate that you assume that they're an all male culture out of necessity, right?
But they're not.
But that's the thing, right?
Like,
So
we met 3
what
in this
happened-
episode.
Yeah, what happened in the past? That was it just because 10 men were born and there was one female? They went, nope, she's weak, so we're just gonna.
Yep.
So, yeah, the history is interesting here for that society. Yeah, you're totally right that it echoes of genital castration for females, or but again, this is also important. They bring up circumcision, and yes, maybe it's not a life-altering change, but also that is changing your child's future without their consent. So
Right.
It's a huge conversation about consent. It's a huge conversation about identity, and it's a huge conversation about female-male relationships. It's a complicated episode that's probably a little bit too much to tackle in 45 minutes.
Yeah, it is. But
But congratulations, Seth, for trying.
I feel like I got a lot out of it. So you started to hit on it before. Do you think this show aligns with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy of kind of inclusion and diversity and optimism?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. I think so. I think we see we see a show, we see a creator that wants to tackle hard problems. He's getting, even if it's not a perfect, story or perfect representation of this struggle, he's getting it in front of primetime eyes. And that's important. And that's what Roddenberry would have done.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think it does too. I think if nothing else, the conversation between Kelly and Ed in the bar, where he said, "Shouldn't we challenge ourselves or police ourselves to not think that we think of other people's ways as wrong just because they're alien?" And Kelly's response, "But isn't there like a universal code of conduct that we have to believe in?" And that those things in there were important. The fact that that the writing, the situation was, squishy enough that we could apply it to several different things and talk about a number of different things, I think was brilliant.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as someone who was raised Catholic and then has grown up to since be if not agnostic, atheistic to some extent, I believe in the universe and the power of things, and
Sure.
that's where I operate. I question too, where do we get that center aligning ethical code if we're not getting it from certain sources? It doesn't need to be provided by religion, but that's how I received a lot of it.
Well,
So,
I think you need to get it through reason. You need to get it through reason. You need to be able to decide right and wrong, not based on the interpretation of the sacred scrolls, but based on.
but based
Right
on
and
what?
wrong.
Yeah. But I know, but then what? What's right and wrong? Is it just how our heart feels or
Yeah.
not? And again, this is not me advocating for religion, which I respect people who are Christian and think, I actually think if you are doing how Christ did it, like he's pretty awesome. The stories of Christ are pretty dope. And I was raised with them. So
Yep.
I certainly don't, I have a hard time with the evangelizing side of most of that stuff.
Right.
But that's a huge digression, but you're totally right. We've got an awesome example of bringing up. We want to be able to talk about these things, and art gets us to do that, and that was successful. Bang, bang. We did it.
Join us next time as we discuss If the Stars Should Appear. Mission Log the Orville is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcasts.roddenberry.com.
Mission Log The Orville is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcast.roddenberry.com.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.